Tunde Okoro woke up that morning with gratitude on his lips. He knelt beside his bed, whispering a soft prayer under his breath like he always did. The sun filtered gently through the white curtains, casting a golden hue across the room. The scent of brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen, and the sound of his children's laughter floated in from the living room. Life, he thought, was good. Predictable. Blessed. Amaka, his wife, had made akara and custard for breakfast. Kamsi, their 4-year-old daughter, had smeared some custard on her nose and giggled as Tunde cleaned it off, making airplane noises. Muna, now 6, ran around the table with his Spider-Man backpack ready for school. "Today's a big day, Daddy?" Muna chirped. Tunde smiled. "Yes, chap. Daddy has an important board meeting. Wish me luck." "If you win it, can we get pizza tonight?" Kamsi asked with bright eyes. "Deal?" He laughed, not knowing that pizza would soon be a luxury. He kissed Amaka on the cheek. "You look beautiful this morning." She smirked playfully. "I always do." He left the house with confidence, wearing a tailored navy blue suit and holding his iPad, filled with presentation notes. His proposal on expanding Enertech's solar projects into northern Nigeria was supposed to be a turning point in his career. But fate had already made other plans. At 10 a.m., the entire company staff was called into the conference room. Some whispered. Others shrugged. Tunde sat at the front, legs crossed, assuming the meeting had something to do with a change in management. Perhaps he imagined he was even about to be promoted. The CEO, Mr. Arins, walked in looking exhausted. His tie hung loose, and there was a tremor in his voice when he began to speak. "My dear colleagues, I wish this meeting was a celebration, but sadly, it is not. Due to our primary investors pulling out and overwhelming operational losses, Enertech Systems will cease operations with immediate effect." Silence. Then confusion. Tunde sat motionless as if someone had just unplugged him from reality. It didn't make sense. He had led some of the company's most successful projects. They had deals pending with government agencies. How could it all end in one sentence? By evening he was packing his things into a box. No severance pay. No notice. No safety net. He sat in his car for hours, staring into nothing. How would he tell Amaka? When he got home, the lights were off. The generator fuel had been rationed carefully, and Tunde didn't want to waste it. He entered the house, his face dim and voice hollow. Amaka emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands. "Babe, you're home early. Did your meeting get cancelled?" He paused. "No. The company's shutting down." She blinked. "What do you mean shutting down?" "I mean, we're all out of a job. Investors pulled out. Everything's gone." He sat on the couch and dropped the box beside him. His office nameplate, some old books, and a company mug. Amaka stared at him, trying to process what she'd just heard. "But, how is that even possible?" she asked, voice rising. "I don't know. Don't you have savings? You've been working for years." "I do, but, you know I've been paying the mortgage, school fees, your boutique investments." "So what do we do now?" she snapped, crossing her arms. Tunde rubbed his face, exhausted. "I'll find something. I just need time." Amaka said nothing. She walked into the room and shut the door. That night he lay on the couch in the dark. Outside, thunder rumbled. Inside, silence weighed like stone. The next morning the struggle began. Tunde began sending out applications to engineering firms, NGOs, power agencies, startups. He rewrote his CV 10 times. He reached out to old classmates and mentors. He even considered relocating to Ghana, where energy projects seemed to be flourishing. But rejection after rejection followed. Overqualified. Position no longer available. "We've gone with another candidate." Soon the fridge emptied. Amaka started dipping into her boutique's cash box to keep the house running. She reminded Tunde often. "I can't keep carrying this family alone, Tunde," she snapped one morning. "This isn't what I signed up for." He sighed, tired. "I didn't plan this either, Amaka. Just be patient with me. Patience doesn't pay rent." The children began to notice. Kamsi asked one day, "Daddy, why don't you go to the office anymore?" He smiled sadly and said, "Because Daddy is building something new from home." It was a lie. But he needed to protect their hearts. After 3 months things got worse. The house help left, no salary. The car had an engine problem, no money for repairs. The school sent a warning about unpaid fees. Even the DSTV subscription expired. But the final straw came when they couldn't afford food. Tunde went to a local shop to buy bread and milk. The owner said, "Engineer Tunde, your credit list is already long. Please clear that one first." Tunde stared at the ground and walked away. It was the first time he truly felt poor. When he got home, Amaka was waiting. Her arms were folded. Her bags were packed. "I'm done." It was one of those evenings Lagos refused to keep dry. The rain fell in slow, relentless drops, tapping on the windows like the ghosts of forgotten memories. Inside the living room, the silence was deafening. The only sound was the ticking of a plastic wall clock and the occasional rumble of thunder overhead. Tunde sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped, trembling. Before him stood Amaka, once his sunshine, now a storm in human form. "I'm leaving," she said for the third time, her voice firm, emotionless. His eyes scanned her face, searching for the woman he married, the girl who once shared roadside suya with him during university days, the woman who held his hand during sleepless nights with their newborn son. But she was gone now. In her place was a woman dressed in high heels, a designer handbag hanging on her shoulder, and her heart elsewhere. "Amaka, please," Tunde said, voice cracking. "Don't do this. Things will change. Just give me time." She scoffed. "Time? We've had 5 months of time. 5 months of nothing but promises, and me watching my friends post vacation photos while I'm hiding from landlords and loan sharks. I didn't plan for this to happen," he whispered. "And I didn't plan to be married to a man who can't feed his family," she snapped. Those words cut deeper than any blade. The children were asleep. Tunde thanked God for that. He didn't want them to hear this. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she continued. "I'm moving to my sister's. I'll enroll the kids in a new school over there. You can keep the house." He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. She looked around, taking one last scan of the place they called home. Her gaze landed on the wall where their wedding picture still hung, Tunde in his white agbada, smiling. Amaka, radiant in her lace gown, leaning into him. It had faded now, both the picture and the love. She turned and walked out into the rain without another word. Tunde didn't chase her. The slam of the door echoed louder than thunder. The silence afterward was suffocating. He remained seated for hours. The same posture. Same haunted expression. His mind played memories like a broken film reel. Muna's first steps, their first Christmas together, the day they bought their first generator and danced around like they won the lottery. He had lost everything in less than a year. Not just his job, not just his status, but his family, his love, his dignity. Tunde Okoro, the man who once signed million-naira contracts, now sat in a dark room with unpaid bills on the table and a half-empty bottle of water as dinner. The following morning he tried to go on with life. He swept the compound. He washed his clothes. He read an old engineering book. But there was a weight in his chest that wouldn't go away. Sometimes he'd reach for his phone hoping for a message from Amaka. "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." But it never came. Worse still, neighbors had started whispering. "That's the man whose wife left him," they'd say in hushed tones. "She took the kids and everything." Tunde tried to ignore it. He smiled when people waved, nodded politely, but inside he was crumbling. Still he didn't give up. Every night he applied for more jobs. Local, foreign, online. He cleaned up his CV, joined new forums, even attended a virtual seminar on innovation in green technology. He clung to the only thing he had left: hope. Sometimes hope was a whisper in the dark. Other times it was just waking up and choosing not to quit. He knew pain now. Intimately. He had dined with it, slept beside it, worn it like a second skin. But he also knew something else. He was still breathing. And as long as he breathed, the story wasn't over. Silence. That was what filled the air in Tunde Okoro's house after Amaka left. Not the gentle kind of silence that comes with peace, but the loud, uncomfortable one that echoes in every room like a haunting reminder. It clung to him, like the smell of damp walls after days of rain. It sat beside him at the dining table. It followed him into bed. It watched him as he wept. For the first time in years, Tunde had no one to talk to. No good morning kisses from Campsy. No, "Daddy, help me with homework," from Muna. No passive-aggressive comments from Amaka. Just echoes. And memories. In those first few weeks, Tunde barely left the house. His beard grew thick and untamed. He stopped shaving. Stopped ironing his clothes. The fridge had long since gone empty, and his bank balance had dipped below 5,000 naira. Yet every morning he woke up. He sat at his plastic table with his laptop, his most prized possession, and applied for jobs like it was a full-time job itself. He would scour Nigerian job boards, Ghanaian boards, South African tech forums, international energy companies. He updated his CV at least once a week, tweaking it to fit whatever job he found. Still no callbacks. No interviews. Just silence. But amid that silence, something else began to grow. Discipline. Tunde began to create a routine. He would wake at 6 a.m., jog around the estate, shower, say a prayer, then spend his morning applying for roles. In the afternoons he would read engineering journals, business books, motivational memoirs, anything to feed his mind. He began writing again too, ideas for renewable energy startups he'd once scribbled years ago. Then came the kids on his street. "Uncle Engineer," one of them called one day, "can you help me with my maths assignment?" At first he hesitated. Then he smiled. "Bring it." Soon, other children came with exercise books, some with torn covers, some with missing pages. And every evening, under the mango tree beside his compound, Tunde taught them. Word spread. A week later, a mother knocked on his gate. "My daughter says you're teaching them for free. Please, let her younger brother join too." Another mother offered to bring food in exchange. One brought a bag of rice. Another, a gallon of palm oil. Tunde didn't ask for anything. But the community began to give. It was in that humble rhythm that Tunde began to heal. He wasn't earning yet. But he was serving. He wasn't climbing the corporate ladder. But he was building something stronger. A reputation, a purpose, a new version of himself. One afternoon, while teaching a particularly stubborn boy about fractions, a Toyota Corolla pulled up near his gate. Tunde thought it was another parent. But it wasn't. It was Fola, his best friend from university, now a tech executive in Abuja. Fola said, getting out of the car. "Guy, you're teaching neighborhood kids now?" Tunde stood, surprised and a little embarrassed. Fola smiled and hugged him. "You haven't changed a bit. Still giving even when you have little." They talked deep into the evening. Tunde told him everything: Enertech shutdown, Amaka leaving, the rejections, the kids. Fola listened quietly. Then he said something that stuck. "You're walking through fire, Tunde. But you're walking. Most people would have curled up and died. I'm proud of you." Tunde didn't cry often, but that night he did. The next day, Fola sent him a link to a renewable energy summit hosted by Africa Green Tech, a continental innovation firm specializing in off-grid solar solutions. Tunde had heard of them. They were the gold standard. "Apply," Fola urged. "I know a guy who knows the project director. Send in your papers." Tunde hesitated. He had been rejected so many times, hope had started to feel like poison. But he applied. 3 days later he got a reply. "Dear Mr. Okoro, we would love to meet you." Tunde stared at the email on his laptop screen like it was a hallucination. "We've reviewed your proposal on scalable solar grids for rural electrification. Africa Green Tech would love to invite you for an initial virtual discussion." He reread the message 3 times, making sure it wasn't another auto-generated rejection. It wasn't. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He began typing his reply with care, then stopped to wipe his eyes. He didn't realize he had started crying. Not loudly. Just silent, warm tears that rolled down his cheeks and dropped onto the laptop surface. Tears not of sadness but of release. For the first time in over a year, someone had said, "We see you." The virtual interview was scheduled for a Friday morning. Tunde had no suit anymore. He had sold it months ago, along with other belongings, just to afford internet data and power. But he wore a crisp white shirt he had kept in his wardrobe, ironed carefully the night before, and made sure his background looked clean. When the call connected, 4 faces appeared on the screen. All executives. All European and African professionals who worked for Africa Green Tech. And they were smiling. Tunde Okoro, said the voice of the moderator, a woman with short curly hair and a thick Senegalese accent. We've heard a lot about you. You didn't know how. But apparently, Fola had spoken to someone who knew someone, and that someone had dug up his old Enertech projects, research papers, even YouTube videos from his university days where he spoke passionately about sustainable energy for underserved communities. For 45 minutes he answered questions with fire. He explained his theories, presented case studies, quoted data. His voice, once silenced by depression, now soared with confidence. When the meeting ended, the lead interviewer leaned forward and said, "We'll be in touch, but let me say this now, we're impressed." 4 days later the offer came. Tunde Okoro was to be the regional project lead for West Africa, spearheading renewable energy deployments in rural and semi-urban communities. The salary was beyond anything he'd ever earned. It came with relocation options, a company vehicle, travel opportunities, housing, and most importantly, respect. He sat in the dark that evening after signing the contract, staring at the stars. There was no generator running. No fancy air conditioner humming. Just the breeze and the sound of peace returning to a man who had once been called finished. Things changed quickly after that. He moved into a modest, beautiful serviced apartment in Abuja and began training with the executive team. His ideas weren't just heard, they were celebrated. One of his community-led solar designs was selected as a pilot for villages in Kwara and Benue states. He traveled again, for the first time in years. Ghana, Senegal, Cape Verde. Everywhere he went, he was no longer just Engineer Tunde. He was Dr. Okoro to some. The visionary to others. He had become a thought leader in the field of sustainable energy. But with all that success, there was one part of his life that remained untouched. His heart. He wasn't bitter about Amaka anymore. No. The pain was still there, sure. But the man she walked away from no longer existed. Tunde had been broken, but he had rebuilt, not to prove her wrong, but to prove himself worthy of his own future. One day while attending a renewable tech workshop in Abuja, he met Chinyu. She wasn't loud or flashy. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She asked questions in meetings that were deep and intelligent. She wore her confidence like a scarf, soft but firm. They bumped into each other at the hotel lounge later that evening. "Mr. Okoro," she said with a knowing smile, "you said something today that stuck with me. The sun shines everywhere, even on the forgotten." "That was beautiful." He chuckled softly. "Thank you. Sometimes we forget it shines even on us." They had tea. Then dinner. Then another meeting. Then long walks discussing books, pain, forgiveness, and the scars they both carried from the past. With Chinyu, Tunde didn't have to perform. He didn't have to impress. She saw him, not the executive, not the title, but the man who had once taught neighborhood kids math under a mango tree. He fell in love again. But this time it was slow. Intentional. Real. On the first anniversary of signing with Africa Green Tech, Tunde returned to Lagos, not to visit Amaka, but to donate a mini solar grid to the local school where he had taught those children. As he watched the lights flicker on, illuminating the faces of kids who had never studied at night before, he smiled deeply. His phone buzzed. It was Chinyu. "You've got that soft smile again. I know it even through text." He replied. "It's the look of a man who walked through fire, and found himself on the other side, still whole." Tunde stood in front of a crowd of dignitaries, engineers, students, and journalists. The grand hall at the Africa Green Tech Summit in Kigali was bathed in golden light, a symbol of innovation and energy. On the screen behind him was the logo of Solar for All, a new initiative he had proposed and led, bringing sustainable solar power to over 200 off-grid communities across West Africa. He wore a dark blue agbada trimmed with gold, a nod to his roots and a calm, commanding smile. "And so, ladies and gentlemen," he concluded, "if we can bring power to forgotten places, perhaps we can also light up forgotten people. Those who've been buried under circumstances who think their story is over. I was one of them. But I stand here today to say, restoration is possible." The room erupted in applause. But it wasn't the applause that mattered. It was the feeling deep inside his chest, that warm, quiet certainty that he had finally become the man he was always meant to be. After the speech, he walked through the courtyard of the hotel, smiling politely as people congratulated him. But he was searching for one face. He found her near the fountain, Chinyu, wearing a flowing emerald dress that swayed with the breeze. Her natural hair was styled in a simple bun, and her brown eyes lit up the moment they saw him. "You looked like a king up there," she said, reaching for his hand. He laughed. "More like a servant in king's clothing." She shook her head. "You're both." They sat by the fountain. He removed his agbada and folded it beside him, revealing the simple white kaftan underneath. He pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket and placed it in her hands. She gasped but didn't open it yet. "Chinyu," he began, his voice low and certain, "I've walked through fire and I thought I had lost everything. But then I found peace, and then I found you. I'm not perfect," he continued. "I carry scars. But I carry them with honor now. And I want to carry them with you. If you'll let me." She opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant silver ring with a tiny sun-shaped diamond in the center. "Will you walk the rest of this journey with me?" he asked. Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes, Tunde. Yes." They embraced under the starlight, as the fountains danced behind them and the future shimmered before them. 6 months later, they got married in a private ceremony in Enugu. There were no rented Rolls Royces or celebrity musicians. Just family, close friends, a garden blooming with white hibiscus, and joy that couldn't be faked. Fola was the best man. The children from the neighborhood he once taught under the mango tree came wearing second-hand suits and dresses. Some cried. Some danced. One brought a handmade drawing that read, "You never gave up on us, Uncle Engineer." Tunde knelt and hugged the boy. "You gave me a reason not to." The following year, Tunde returned to Lagos, this time as a guest speaker at the Nigerian Energy Forum. As he walked through the conference hall, dressed simply in a black suit, he noticed a familiar face. Amaka. She was standing near the refreshment table, wearing a silk blouse and black pants. She had aged slightly. There were lines around her eyes, and though her makeup was flawless, her smile was thin. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Then she walked toward him, carefully. "Tunde," she said almost in a whisper. "It's good to see you." He nodded gently. "Good to see you too, Amaka." She looked at his ring. Then at his face. "You've changed," she said. "Yes. Pain has a way of reshaping people." She looked down, then asked, "Are you happy?" He paused, not out of doubt but out of reflection. "I am," he said. "And I hope you are too." There was no bitterness in his voice. No accusation. Just truth. She gave a half-smile. "I'm working on it." They parted with a handshake, soft, sincere. A quiet closure. That evening, Tunde sat with Chinyu and watched the sun set over the Abuja hills. He turned to her and said, "Do you believe everything happens for a reason?" She looked at him. "Not always. But I believe grace can rewrite even the worst chapters." He smiled. "Then I guess this is chapter 1 of our best volume yet."